The mouse of the day is Wrinklestiltskin, and he's a very, very wrinkly mouse. You might think he's old. He's actually not old. He's just extremely wrinkly. All over his ears, all over his eyelids, all over his entire body, actually. But you just can't tell because he always wears clothes on his body, and then he has very long fur that covers his wrinkles. But trust me, he is extremely wrinkly. If you touch him, it feels similar to touching like a Siamese cat or something. Just weird, sort of furless, just very, very wrinkly and weird, but he's still a pretty chill mouse. Let's get into today's story, but first, guys, don't forget to squeak, like, and cheese scribe. Beneath the gnarled branches of an impossibly old oak tree lived a mouse none other than Crinklestiltskin. His name was always spoken with awe and caution, for he was not just any mouse, but a wielder of an ancient magic. His very fur and flesh marked the passage of time. His face and body were etched with deep wrinkles, each one said to hold the remnants of spells long forgotten. The folds of his skin glimmered faintly in the moonlight as though the magic within him threatened to escape. This evening, as the last rays of sunlight disappeared, a sharp knock echoed against the twisted wood on his door. Crinklestiltskin, seated by his modest hearth and poring over an ancient tome, paused mid-chant. Visitors were rare and rarely without purpose. He grabbed his crooked staff, its surface carved with intricate runes that glowed faintly as his hand closed around it. Shuffling to the door, he muttered under his breath, "Who dares disturb me at this hour?" When he eventually opened the door, though, his anger faded. Standing before him was Wrinklestiltskin, his old friend and occasional rival in the mischief. The sight of him brought a flicker of amusement to Crinklestiltskin's otherwise stoic demeanor. "Crinklestiltskin," Wrinklestiltskin greeted him with a sly grin. "You're as wrinkly as ever." "And you're as meddlesome as ever," Crinklestiltskin replied, stepping aside to let his friend in. "What brings you to my door tonight?" As Wrinklestiltskin entered, his usual air of mischief was tempered by something darker. He glanced around the small but well-kept dwelling, its shelves lined with glowing jars, scrolls, and mysterious artifacts. "It's bad," Crinklestiltskin, "worse than anything I've ever seen before." Crinklestiltskin arched his brow, his wrinkles deepening with concern. Wrinklestiltskin began pacing, his usual theatrics giving way to genuine urgency. "The Stone of Ages," he said finally. "Something's happening to it. It's a vortex. Something has formed above it, tearing at the fabric of the forest itself. The trees are withering, the rivers are reversing, and the animals are fleeing. Whatever is causing it, it's not natural." Crinklestiltskin pulled back. The Stone of Ages was a relic of unimaginable power, buried in the heart of Glimmerwood and guarded by forces older than the forest itself. If a vortex had formed there, it could mean one thing: someone was tampering with magic they couldn't control. "And you've come to me because you think I can fix it?" Crinklestiltskin asked, his tone skeptical but his resolve already forming. "You're the only one who can," Wrinklestiltskin replied. "This is not some prank or petty spell gone wrong. This is an ancient magic. Dangerous magic." Without another word, Crinklestiltskin turned to a shelf and began gathering what he needed. A satchel filled with enchanted trinkets, a flash of glowing blue liquid, and his most trusted map of the forest. He placed the items into a leather pouch slung across his shoulder and glanced at his friend. "We leave now." The journey to the Stone of Ages was fraught with unease. The deeper they ventured into Glimmerwood, the more alive the forest seemed. But not its usual vibrant way. The trees groaned as though they were in pain, their branches twisting unnaturally towards the vortex in the distance. The air was thick, charged with energy that made their fur stand on end. Wrinklestiltskin stayed close behind Crinklestiltskin, who led the way with his staff glowing faintly in the dark. As they walked, Wrinklestiltskin tried to lighten the mood. "You know, you're quite the sight in this dim light, glowing with wrinkles and all." Crinklestiltskin snorted but didn't reply. His attention was fixed on the path ahead. The faint hum of magic that permeated the forest grew louder with every step, vibrating in his bones. Finally, they emerged into a clearing, and there it was, the Stone of Ages. The monolith stood taller than any tree, its surface covered in pulsating runes that radiated with ancient power. Above it swirled a vortex, a churning mass of purple and gold energy that crackled with raw magic. The ground around the stone was scorched, and the very air seemed to ripple with heat. Crinklestiltskin stepped forward cautiously, his staff raised. "This is worse than I imagined." Before Wrinklestiltskin could respond, a shadow moved near the stone. Both mice froze as the figure stepped into the light of the swirling vortex. It was another mouse, but its appearance was warped, almost monstrous. Its eyes glowed a sickly green, and its fur shimmered unnaturally as though it were made of a liquid shadow. "Who dares approach the Stone of Ages?" the figure demanded, its voice a chilling echo. Crinklestiltskin's wrinkles deepened as his expression hardened. "I am Crinklestiltskin, keeper of the old ways, and you are tampering with forces you cannot comprehend." The shadowy mouse sneered. "I'm Noxious Nolan, and I seek to claim the power of the stone for myself. With it, I will reshape this forest and bend it to my will." Wrinklestiltskin stepped up, but his usual bravado was faltering. "You can't control that kind of power. It will destroy you." Noxious Nolan laughed, a hollow, menacing sound. "You underestimate me, and now you will pay the price." Without warning, Nolan raised a paw and a bolt of energy shot towards them. Crinklestiltskin reacted instantly, raising his staff to create a shimmering barrier. The energy collided with the shield, sending sparks flying in all directions. "You've made a grave mistake here, Crinklestiltskin," said the voice, calm but firm. "You've underestimated my power." He began to chant, his words resonating with the runes of the Stone of Ages. The vortex wavered, its color dimming as the ancient magic responded to Crinklestiltskin's call. Nolan snarled, launching another attack, but Crinklestiltskin deflected it with ease. His wrinkles glowed faintly as they absorbed and redirected the energy. Wrinklestiltskin watched in awe as his friend moved with purpose, every motion precise and deliberate. For all his teasing, he had never doubted Crinklestiltskin's power, and now he was witnessing it in full force. "The power of the stone belongs to me and no one else. It exists to maintain balance, not to be wielded by those blinded by ambition." As the vortex began to shrink, its energy drawn towards the stone, Nolan screamed in defiance. His form flickered, the shadowy magic unraveled to reveal the frail mouse beneath. But his desperation only made him more dangerous. Crinklestiltskin gripped his staff tightly, his wrinkles glowing brightly as he prepared for the final confrontation. The vortex trembled as Crinklestiltskin's chant grew louder, the air vibrating with the force of ancient magic. Noxious Nolan, without his shadowy guise, staggered back, his eyes glowing, filled with desperation. He raised a trembling paw and shouted, "You cannot defeat me! I will not yield!" Crinklestiltskin ignored Nolan's outburst, his focus unwavering. His staff glowed with a brilliant light, and his wrinkles shimmered as though they absorbed the chaotic energy around him. Each chant pulled another thread of the vortex's power back into the Stone of Ages. The runes on the monolith pulsated with the harmony of his words. The forest, which had been writhing under the strain of the vortex, began to calm. The groaning trees stilled, the earth beneath them stopped trembling finally. Wrinklestiltskin, watching from the edge of the clearing, called out, "You're doing it! Crinklestiltskin, keep going!" But Noxious Nolan wasn't done. The battle was far from over, but Crinklestiltskin's voice remained steady. With a guttural scream, he lunged forward, his small frame wreathed in the remnants of the corrupted magic. He clawed at the air, summoning a final desperate surge of power from the vortex. The energy swirled into a crackling orb above his head, radiating with heat. "If I can't have the stone," Nolan snarled, "then no one can." He hurled the orb toward the Stone of Ages. Crinklestiltskin, sensing the imminent danger, raised his staff high and thrust it into the ground. A shimmering dome of light erupted from the staff, encasing the stone itself. The orb collided with the barrier, exploding into a burst of energy that sent shockwaves rippling through the air. Wrinklestiltskin was knocked off his feet, tumbling backward into a patch of moss. "Crinklestiltskin!" he shouted, scrambling to his paws. "Are you alright?" Inside the barrier, Crinklestiltskin stood firm, though the effort of maintaining the shield was etched across his face. His wrinkles seemed to glow even brighter, the magic within him straining against the overwhelming force of the explosion. Slowly, he extended a paw and began to draw the remaining energy out of the vortex himself. The swirling mass above the Stone of Ages grew smaller and smaller until with a final surge it completely vanished. The clearing fell silent. The oppressive energy that had filled the air dissipated, leaving behind a sense of calm. The Stone of Ages stood tall and unscathed, its runes glowing faintly in the moonlight. Crinklestiltskin lowered his staff, the barrier fading away. His legs wobbled and he leaned heavily on the staff to keep him upright. Wrinklestiltskin rushed to his side, his usual air of mischief replaced by genuine concern. "Are you all right, old friend?" Wrinklestiltskin asked. Crinklestiltskin nodded slowly, his breath labored but steady. "I am, but the balance is restored, that's what matters." Noxious Nolan, now stripped of his magic and reduced to a frail, trembling mouse, collapsed to his knees. His fur was dull, his eyes hollow. He looked up at Crinklestiltskin with a mixture of fear and shame. "You were right," Nolan croaked. "I couldn't control it. I was consumed." Crinklestiltskin regarded him with a measured gaze, his eyes wrinkled, softening into an expression of pity. "Power is a dangerous thing, Nolan, especially when sought for selfish purposes. The magic of the stone was never meant to be wielded by one creature alone. The stone was meant to heal our community, not take it apart." Nolan lowered his head, his shoulders slumping. What will happen to me now?" Wrinklestiltskin piped up, his usual cheeky grin returning. "Well, for starters, you might want to take up gardening or something. Magic's clearly not your thing." Crinklestiltskin shot his friend a warning glance before turning back to Nolan. "You will leave this forest and never return. Seek a life of simplicity, free from the temptations of power. That is the only way to make up for the damage you've caused." Nolan nodded weakly, too defeated to argue. With one last glance at the Stone of Ages, he turned and began to leave. He shuffled away, disappearing into the shadows of the forest forever. As the two old friends watched him go, Wrinklestiltskin let out a low whistle. Well, that was intense. He always did have a knack for the dramatic. The two mice stood in silence for a moment, the weight of what had just transpired finally sitting over them. The forest, now quiet and still, seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The stars above them shone brighter, their light cutting through the lingering darkness. Finally, Wrinklestiltskin broke the silence. "So what happens now? Do we just go back to your place and pretend like this never happened?" Crinklestiltskin smiled faintly faintly, his wrinkles deepening with the emotion. "The forest will heal as it always does, and I will continue my work as I always have. But first, I believe I owe you a cup of tea." Wrinklestiltskin smiled. "Now you're talking." Together, the two mice made their way back through the forest, their path illuminated by the faint glow of Crinklestiltskin's staff. Though their paws were slow and their bodies weary, there was a sense of peace between them, a quiet understanding that they had done their part to protect the balance of the world. As they reached the edge of the clearing, Wrinklestiltskin glanced over his shoulder at the Stone of Ages. It was a silent symbol in the heart of the forest. "You know," he said, his tone uncharacteristically serious, "it's a good thing you're around, Crinklestiltskin. The forest needs you." Crinklestiltskin didn't reply immediately. He looked up at the stars, his wrinkled face serene. "The forest doesn't need me, Wrinklestiltskin. It needs balance, and as long as I'm here, I'll do what I can to help." With that, the two friends disappeared into the forest, their figures swallowed by the gentle darkness of Glimmerwood. The forest, now quiet and whole, whispered its gratitude in the rustling of the leaves and the soft chirping of crickets. And at the center of it all, the Stone of Ages stood watch, its ancient magic pulsing faintly, a reminder of the delicate balance that held the world together. So do you guys mess with Wrinklestiltskin?